All right, let's talk about a couple topics. One of the ones I want to get into is about Ricardo Pepi, because apparently he's at Groningen right now on loan from Augsburg, who purchased him from FC Dallas, just to connect all those dots for everybody. And Derek Ray, who's a friend of ours, said that Ricardo Pepi insists that he's not going back to Augsburg after the Groningen loan, though the club, Augsburg, insists that he's part of the plan. So we have what I like to call a good old-fashioned conundrum here. I'll go on and say that Ricardo Pepi is on quote saying, "I won't go back to Augsburg and have let the club know." Augsburg have said are planning with him and have no intention of allowing a transfer as ahead of next season. Pepi's rep, Jaime Garcia, has been critical of Augsburg for allegedly not communicating with Pepi, the coach, per Pepi not speaking to him, unknown which coach he means, and then director, twice not turning up to a meeting with Ricardo and Jaime. So this is interesting. And got some drama here with Ricardo Pepi, who actually also came out and said, which I thought was cool, that why he was drawn to Groningen was that Luis Suarez also had a stay there at that club early on in his career. And it's looking like Ricardo Pepi could eclipse the numbers that Luis Suarez had when I think he played 35 some games, and Ricardo Pepi might have more goals and assists when he gets up to that number as well. So what are you thinking about this? And if Ricardo Pepi, I mean, we have obviously talked about him staying in the Dutch league and trying to get up to Feyenoord or PSV or one of the top clubs that's always competing in Europe. But what does this mean now? And if he goes back to Augsburg, I feel like the guy is going to be miserable because he looked miserable when he first got there.
Yeah, I think, obviously there's some airing of dirty laundry, which I don't really like for a young player to speak about that sort of stuff, or even an agent to use specific examples. I know you want to tell your side of the story, but I feel like there's that's a little bit well, they said they were going to call him and they didn't call him, and that kind of stuff.
I think it's been pushed to a point. I mean, this seems like it's happened multiple times. And at what point?
Oh yeah. I don't think he's wrong. I think if you get brought into a club and you're a young player that spent this much money, you are constantly stuck between prove to us that you're worth this money. Right. And during the time that he was there, survive relegation. And those two things don't go together. A young player that's a goal scorer being given limited minutes can never prove himself. So I think the agent's right in that. What do you do with 20 to 30 minutes a game? And then also the pressures of relegation. Now the club is also sliding down to the bottom of the table again as we speak. And so if I were him, I'm looking at it going I'm actually having fun. I'm enjoying myself. And the Dutch league's going to fit a guy like that, right? 4-3-3 systems generally, where he's going to get the ball in and around the goal. He's going to get multiple chances a game to score. He's going to be able to create things on his own. You play a little bit more of a aesthetically pleasing style of play. So I like the idea of him staying. I don't love that they're kind of airing that in this way, because I think it puts it into a very challenging situation that if you're a Feyenoord or a PSV, you're kind of unless you're aware of the tactic around why he's doing that, you're kind of oh, is this player going to be one where if he doesn't start for me, he's going to come out and talk, or he's going to say something that sort of thing for a young player. He's way too young to be kind of opening up about being I'm absolutely not going back to a club, because that's also just not how the world works, right? They could bring him back and just go sit in the corner for a couple of years, which they wouldn't do. And he knows he has leverage with the fact that they paid a bunch of money for him. But I don't love that coming out. But I don't disagree.
Okay. There's a part of me. Yeah. I don't know if this is the right tactic. And I agree with you on that sentiment. But there's a part of me that kind of appreciates that he backs himself so much that he's yeah, I don't want to go there. I believe in myself so much that even if anybody tried to hold me back, I'm still going to figure out a way to have success. Maybe I'm leading way into
Jimmy,
that. I get it. He's young.
Okay, that's one part though. But the other part is, if you remember, it was sort of a hostile exit from FC Dallas.
It was.
Sort of forced himself out of that.
That's true.
And so now you're okay, one example that didn't work out. Now you're outwardly facing about this other example, this situation.
There's a pattern.
There's a pattern there that I'm you're young,
emerging.
You are performing, you're doing really well. The opportunity is going to present itself, but forcing it publicly, I just go who's giving this type of advice?
Yeah,
maybe it's a personality thing.
It's a red flag.
Yeah.
It's a red flag. But I do like players that have a little chip on their shoulder.
Oh, me too. I love it. I love it. But every time I double down on Pepi and say he's the greatest, like I need him to deliver. And now you're creating another little bit of a mountain for us to overcome collectively, Pepi and I, to deliver.
Right. Yeah. We'll
stay
see
in Holland though, score a bunch of goals.
With the Pepi hype train. Choo choo.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk. Let's go to Chelsea. They lost 1-0 to Wolves. Very important win for Wolves as they continue to try to scrape above the relegation zone. Chelsea, incomplete. I don't know. Dumpster fire. It's just, when you look at this team on paper, I don't even know how they could ever lose a game. I mean, you got, Kepa, I guess, has his own stuff to go along with it. We got Reece James, Fofana, Koulibaly, Cucurella, Gallagher, Enzo Fernandez, Kovacic, Joao Felix, Havertz, Raheem Sterling. When you start to read out those names, you're like, whoa, when did an all-star team join the Premier League? But they play like that. And I know it's not easy for anybody in Frank Lampard's situation to just all of a sudden solve it. But you'd like to think he'd been studying the team and would have some ideas. Maybe
some sort of bounce, some sort of response.
Yeah, like a response. Christian Pulisic. He came on with about 22 minutes left, it looks like. No, sorry, he came on with about 29 minutes left. He was the first sub off the bench, so that's promising for Kai Havertz. And I don't know how much of a difference he made per se, but at least he was being trusted to make an impact. And I think that's good. So now I wonder, because Chelsea plays against Real Madrid, Heath Pierce, and for everybody listening / watching, do you think that Super Frank, given how lackluster Chelsea, not that they weren't dangerous, but they're not making clear-cut opportunities that they're just missing, right? They're still feels very individualistic. But do you think that Christian could potentially get the start against Real Madrid, knowing he's got a pretty good track record against them in European competition?
I would love for him to get the start, but I think that individualism, I think, is a really funny thing, because even though we've pitted Pulisic individually against all the other teammates there, I think about the rhythm and the fact they brought in so many players that how do you actually find, right? In the perfect years, all those players play for the team and you figure it out and you win things like Champions League and the league, or in the Abramovich days. But when I look at it now, I think about it through the lens of, like, you bring in all these players, like, who's the leader, right? Who's controlling that locker room? Who owns that locker room? Who is accountable for that? And when I think about just all of that mixed in, you got a bunch of guys trying to prove themselves, right? And that sometimes throws team tactics and team chemistry out the window, especially when there's not just like foundational players that are going to be the ones that sort of have bring all that individualism into a collective mission. And then change of managers, change of ownership, all those things, man, that's tough. But I would love to see Christian Pulisic get an opportunity, but not too much, because I need him to leave in the summer. Enough to do something, but not enough to do nothing. That's what I wanted to.
Yeah, Chelsea hit the road to play Real Madrid, the reigning champs, in Madrid on Wednesday. The game will kick off at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern on Paramount Plus. And that should be a very good one. Lots of the good games in the Champions League. Milan, Napoli, Benfica, Inter, Man City, Bayern Munich. I mean, those are the last 8. So very exciting to see how that's all going to play out.